Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Founders Craft Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Gonzalez, and joining me on the show today is my good friend Sean Lemon. I'm here in Franklin, Tennessee. Welcome to the show. And
Thank you.
So, for those of you who are listening, I've actually invited Sean to join on this particular episode because he is a genius when it comes to zooming out on your organization and understanding technology's proper role, right? Yeah. Because sometimes we are starting our companies and naturally we are just adding this app and this service and this product and I've heard we need to have a social media account, so we're on Instagram, and so all these things just start happening, and then before you know it, it's this chaotic nightmare where you're responding to emails and you're trying to answer comments on your social media.
People are texting you at all hours of the night.
Exactly. And so it's like, how do you really know what you should have and what you shouldn't have? Yeah. And so I want to talk about that today.
Cool.
And to do that, let's just kind of start with how you got into being known as the digital organizer. So let's talk about that a little bit and what got you into really understanding how to systematically look at technology in its role within business.
Totally. So I started, I guess, this whole journey by working at the Apple Store. So I was in the role of creative, which people would buy a one-to-one membership and they would book an hour session with a trainer and learn how to use their Apple technology. But the conversation that I had over and over again is this one where someone would say, oh, I know I'm only using 10% of what this thing is actually capable of. And, something along those lines there, or I know I should know this, but, and it's all of these feelings of that everyone else is so much further along in technology than I am. And this can do so much more. And I should be doing so much more with this technology. And of course I saw like a lot of problems that people had, and I wanted to solve them. But the entire time I was constantly reassuring people that no, you don't need to know all of this. Just because it has all these features doesn't mean you need to be using all of them. Right. You need to dedicate all this time to learning this tool that really isn't your passion. Like, why are you going to learn GarageBand if you have no passion for creating music? So sure, I can show you how you can do it. Maybe you can inspire it and tinker with it, but should you be using it in the first place? And my goal was always in that training of how do I teach you how to do it, and so that it makes sense to you and it's set up in a way that you accomplish your goals, and then you can do other things that you're interested in instead of spending all of your time trying to figure out how your technology works and feeling like you need to do something. So then when I went out on my own and started going to people's homes and into their businesses to help them, a lot of times it started out with me fixing their stuff because that's the big pain point. Right. And then it was, let's have an intentional conversation about this. How are you using this? What's your outcome? Because they'll come to me with this thing that they want or they want fixed, or that they want to accomplish, and the real question is, do you really need to be doing it in the first place? And let's talk about what you're trying to accomplish. And then I'll introduce you to the tools or the systems that we can use, and you can pick from that. And we'll design it to what the outcome is, rather than getting caught up in what you're supposed to be doing. And so, really, that's that big conversation, and why originally I started out as Lemon Consulting was my temporary business name, because I couldn't think of anything else. But really, the direction I wanted to go in is digital organization and real intentional use of products, because overwhelm is real, because there are so many decisions. We have decision fatigue, it's like, let's take a lot of stuff off the table so that you can do what you want, rather than being dictated by technology or what society tells you that you should be doing in the first place.
That makes a lot of sense. And a lot of the times when you are in that process of just trying to keep up with technology, things are always changing. Sometimes we don't necessarily have a system in place to determine what needs to be upgraded, what app we should use, why we're using it in the first place, and then also revisiting technology's role as you build your team, right?
And
definitely. So
Because a lot changes, and you may not need a tool, or you may need something else.
Exactly. So let's unpack that, right? So you work with business leaders who are either early on or even more established in their journey scaling their organization. What would you say is something that business leaders should think about, especially entrepreneurs who are just getting started, as they are beginning to reevaluate the technology in their overall workflow in their life?
So there's typically a few core things that every business has, right? We have communication, we have file storage, we've got to figure out what our tasks are and what we're working on. We need to be able to share passwords internally and be effective with that. And then we have various pieces of information. So if you're a content creator, you're going to have a lot of things that you need for that, and different software tools and everything. So it's really diving in to find out, what do you do, and how do you communicate with people. And a lot of times I'm identifying those pain points first, and that'll kind of tell us what's going on. With, okay, it's about organization, and then we can talk about what is it that you guys are really doing, and how are you organizing now. And so typically what happens is I come in and they've got Evernote, they have Google Drive, they have Dropbox, Box.com, stuff stored on iCloud, they've got they checked out Bear instead of Evernote, then there's Google Notes. And so all of these scattered pieces of information that we're trying to consolidate together. And so it's trying to figure out, what do you do and how should you store things in the first place? How are you communicating internally? So are you just using email primarily? A lot of people just use email. Some people are using Slack. Some companies, everyone texts each other all hours of the day. So it's how is that internal communication happening? And when do you need to be communicating with each other? So then we start picking, like, okay, really what we're dealing with are files. And so we just need a central place for all of our files. Where is that going to be? Determine that, commit to it, and stop trying out every shiny new object. And I'm very much like, how low tech can we get with everything to keep it very, very simple? I take this task filter to everything that I'm coming up to with work is, can I eliminate it first? Do I really need this? Can it be accomplished with something else? Then can I automate something? So what are we doing? Are we communicating internally about things that could be automated another way? And can we delegate something to someone else? So I'm taking that approach to those tools as well. But I guess the other core element is helping people get out of the mindset of trying to find a tool that does everything. Like, I want things that serve multiple roles. That's important. Otherwise we have a ton of stuff. But there's this idea of a dedicated place for something. A dedicated place where you store all of your files. A dedicated place where you communicate about these projects. A dedicated place where all of this specific information is stored password-wise, or what have you. So it's creating compartments and just being really intentional about that. So how can I minimize is the first thing, is that process is, what can I eliminate, what can I automate, and then can we take this down and then really start scrutinizing, what do you guys do? What are you spending all of your time in? And then we figure out, what tool can we use?
That's great. And one of the things you just mentioned, that whole idea of having a dedicated space for communication, a dedicated space for file storage. I mean, if you think about it, as smartphones and laptops became more and more powerful, it was that one device that we expected to do so many different things. But if you really dig down into the root of it, it goes back to kind of our analog roots of, I have my file cabinet, I have my telephone, I have my notepad, and these are dedicated tangible objects that certain interactions are happening. And the lines kind of got blurred as devices started doing everything. Like, my phone now isn't just a phone. We barely even use the phone feature, right? We're using it. We're using it for maps. We're using it for music. We're using it for everything else. And so, bringing normalcy back to dedicated functions on a device that does multiple things is huge, right? And so let's use an example. Let's imagine you're working with a content creator, and let's say they do a combination of written material and video.
Yeah.
Right. What are some tangible things that they can begin to evaluate as they're looking at maybe their overall workflow with dealing with information? What are some best practices that we can begin to start implementing if you're working with a content creator? When it comes to having those dedicated spaces for those functions.
Yeah. Figure out if you're going to use Google Drive, Dropbox, Box, and have a central place for all of your files. Now, I use Google Drive because I love Google Docs, in that the collaboration tools are easy. Everything it's kind of stripped down. It's very simple, and I've never lost a file.
Right.
Never ever lost a file,
Yeah.
or saved something, but it didn't save.
Right.
And stuff like that. So that's huge, and putting everything in there. And so stop using your Photos app for photos that are going in Instagram, or your logos, or even headshots and photo shoots and things like that. I don't store any of that stuff in my personal photo library because that's just personal.
Right.
And so when I'm looking for a specific photo shoot, then I need to go into my media folder and into photo shoots and find that specific shoot.
Yeah.
And so I've got that. I can go into media, I can go to logos and find the logo that I need. And so we're keeping personal set aside, and then I'm using a central file storage in Google Drive that says, these are the documents. This is documentation. So, if you're working on courses, I have a folder for courses.
Yeah.
I've got a folder for that course, and then everything is broken up in there. So the entire context is in one place. I'm not using Evernote to write. I'm not using any other apps. I'm using Google Drive to write.
Wow. Yeah.
Because you just open it up and you write. It creates a document.
Yeah.
Like, I know you can put a fancy table and all this formatting in Evernote, but that's in Evernote.
Right.
And then when you need to get it into WordPress, you need to get into Squarespace, it's somewhere else. And then when you start collaborating with other people, it gets really messy.
It does.
So
It does.
if you just start off by consolidating and try and just use things as simple as possible, keep it all in one place, keep all the assets for that course in one place, then you can easily share that.
Yeah.
Or you can easily share that one folder with someone else. And there's other, little hacks that you can do to have a central repository for all of your images using aliases and things like that.
Yeah.
But I just try and keep it simple. All of this is we're just dealing with files and folders. So it's really easy. The harder part is figuring out how it should be structured and what your framework should be. And to determine that structure or framework, I ask the question of, what do you do?
Yeah.
And what are we working with? Show me all of your stuff. Show me the mess from everywhere.
Right.
And we're looking for that common themes. How do we categorize it? And can we break it down into 10 different categories or 4 different categories? And then break it down from there. And while it feels like a lot, when you start moving it around, it doesn't take that long to actually get it under control. And once you've got it under control, you want to keep it that way.
Exactly. And now let's talk about that transition that, let's say, an independent entrepreneur will eventually bring on employee number 1 or employee number 2, right?
Yeah.
And so now you as an individual have full control, you have everything centralized.
Right.
But now you're introducing another set of complexities, right? By now interacting with more than one person.
Yeah.
So just like you described, you're sharing passwords now. They need access to the latest version of that document.
Right.
What are some things that our listeners can do to navigate that transition of introducing another person to have access to that information?
So you can introduce the idea of one folder that's the company drive, and anything that should be shared company-wide goes in there. And then you can create another folder called confidential drive or something along those lines where, your pro forma and other things, for leadership or from an executive level, even if it's just yourself, that's segmented out so that when someone comes in, you can share that one folder.
Right.
So that's one way to go about it. if you're very proactive, which isn't always the
No,
case.
yeah.
You're bringing in someone because things are crazy and you need help.
Exactly, yeah.
So, but that is the way that I like to do it, is have different folders specific to that. Or you could just share, if you're organized enough, you might just share those 5 folders that person needs access to based on their role. And then as far as sharing passwords, I use a system called 1Password, which is cross-platform, which is cool.
Love 1Password. Yeah.
Yes, it's so good. So the 1Password for business allows you to create multiple vaults. So I have a personal vault where, maybe some client logins will be, and sensitive stuff just for me. I have one that's Sean and Madeline, so I share that with my wife, Madeline, and so that's our default place to put everything. So we both have access to all the different accounts, shopping or email or financial and things like that. Personal financial. I have a financial vault that's shared with my bookkeeper, and it's shared with Madeline. So so the 3 of us have that, and then I have another vault for my executive assistant. So anything that she's going to need access to, she has. And of course, Madeline has access to that one too.
Yeah.
So you get to choose which vault is shared with which person.
Yeah.
And so how I organize those passwords, for example, are based on role. And so when I bring someone on, they're going to be in this role. And so they're going to need access to all the social media and marketing vault. And so we keep all the things in there. So I'm always trying to think about categories and then the roles for who's going to need to access this. And, and it's going to be category and role based.
That's
so
good.
That's how I do it.
I want to emphasize that. So if we can begin to think about the categories of roles that are either going to be eventually delegated within our companies or that we currently have, and then begin to think about the tech stack that surrounds those categories, that allows you then to be very systematic in organizing not only the files but permissions and passwords. I love that.
You can, if you want to get really nerdy about it, you can keep that same structure across all of your systems.
Love that. Yeah.
So when you're building out Asana, you're building out based on teams.
Nice.
And the roles that they're in. And then you go to your company drive and it's organized based on the teams and roles. And then your passwords are set up that way. So it's easy when you onboard someone. You say they need access to this set of folders, to this vault, and they need to be put in this team in Asana.
Yeah.
So, you can even do the same thing with email. And that's where I really am trying to craft the organization system for some of these businesses is, okay, can we keep it all the same so when you learn one system, you're learning them all?
Learning them all. That's excellent. I love that.